Welcome to this chapter by chapter reading of the Montessori Method by Dr. Maria Montessori. When I was starting my Montessori school, I turned directly to Dr. Montessori's original writings, partly out of conviction and partly because they were available in the public domain and free. What I didn't realize at the time was I was reading the original English translation commissioned while Dr. Montessori was still alive, translated in 1912 by Anne E. George. Later, I discovered that many of us have encountered Montessori through later translations, especially the 1967 version, which helped spread the method widely in the US, and for which I'm personally grateful. But returning to the original text, I found something more: Dr. Montessori's full voice, her depth, her vision, and her spiritual and philosophical foundations. In this podcast, I'm reading the original translation chapter by chapter, adding reflections to help connect her words to today's classrooms and families. This is an experiment, an adventure, and a shared journey of learning. Let's begin. So today I will be reading chapter 3. Now, chapter 3 in the Montessori Method in the 1912 edition is, this is her inaugural address delivered on the occasion of the opening of one of the children's houses. So that is the title of it. Before we start, I want to invite you to listen not just to Montessori's techniques, but for how Dr. Montessori sees the child intellectually, morally, and spiritually. This chapter was written at a very different time, but many of the questions she raises still surprisingly modern. This chapter, as I mentioned, is her opening address, or her inaugural address. And I think this is very interesting because there's a couple of things that are happening. One, this chapter, while in the original translation, is on the third. It's in the third chapter, right? Of I think 23 or 24 chapters in total. So clearly there is a lot of importance to her in this address, and it was put in such a prominent spot for a reason. But in the 1967 version of this book, this translation of this book, it is in the appendix at the very end of the book. So this chapter is a public address delivered at the opening of one of the earliest children's houses. This is the second one, to be specific. The tone is moral, social, human, deeply human. And it's offering this window into Montessori's core beliefs before her method was fully systematized. Okay? So I think that this is important because it changes how readers encounter her social philosophy. I would say my interpretation of this chapter is that the central theme is on human dignity. Montessori frames education as an act of restoring dignity, especially to children who have been historically ignored, controlled, or underestimated. The child is presented not as a problem to be managed, but as a person deserving respect, care, and freedom within limits. Education is not merely academic, it is a moral and social work. I actually, just in a podcast I did before, really talked about how it was a calling, a vocation. And I truly do believe this. I mean, certainly being a teacher is, but being a Montessori teacher is next level. So I would say that there's a lot of parallels to today, and I hope that you hear that as well. She explores, and again, this is early on in her experimentation and experience, but she really feels some kind of she feels a sense of communal ideals. She really aligns a lot with some of the communism traits at this point, I think. And I think she's struggling with it because she says some things that are very communal and socialist in a way. But then she says other things that are concerns to her under communism and socialism. I mean, she's not outright saying these things, but the tone and the thoughts are there. And given the nature of what's going on at the time politically, I think this is an important thing to kind of ponder or discuss. She, in fact, does discover or identifies dangers in this ideology, and she identifies them in this as the dissolution of the family, the weakening of the mother-child bond, and then the prioritization of the ideology over human development. Her concern is not economic theory, but what happens to the child when the family unit erodes. The family comes first and school is secondary. I really think that she alludes to this. I don't think she finds her schools as a replacement to the mother and child. I don't think that at all. I think that she has an opportunity because there is this dissolution of the family because of economic situations or whatever is going on at that time or that era. And so the children who are largely ignored and left to their own devices, she's stepping in with her children's houses to complete that that necessary part of the formation of the man. And so she talks about how the home, especially the mother, is primary. And the children's house is framed as a support, not a replacement for the family, and a response to modern realities with working parents. She talks about working mothers. This tension feels remarkably contemporary, actually. It really does. And mothers working out of necessity and families relying on schools more than ever. Let's see. And so because of that, schools are asked to carry emotional, moral, and developmental weight once held by families. I believe that to be very accurate. Modern parallels that stand out, parent attitudes towards teachers. Montessori specifically calls for respect and partnership, not suspicion or delegation. Working families, Children's House emerges as a social solution, not an idealized one. And education as a social infrastructure, school exists because society has changed, not because children belong to the state. A warning, hidden in plain sight. So Montessori equates extreme collectivist ideology with the breaking apart of the family. This stance later placed her at odds with authoritarian systems and her eventual conflict with Mussolini and her forced departure from Italy. And it can be traced back to these early convictions. Simply put, that the child does not belong to the state and education must serve human development. So, some things that I was thinking about, and I wonder, I don't know. So at the time that this book was published, and I mean that for the English translation, the middle class children's house had just opened. And so I wonder how was that received, right? Because it started out, Dr. Montessori herself started out with the children in the asylum, right? And then moved to the poor children and opened up a couple of children's houses among poor children. And then she opens up this other house over specifically for middle class families. And so I'm wondering how that was, like, what was the reception for it? And like, I'm also wondering, because she talks a lot in this book about the children not coming fed, clothed, clean. And so she was providing a lot of those services in the children's house. So was she still doing that? Just so many things that I'm wondering. What did dignity look like? Does it look different? I don't know. How did, obviously she had said in the last chapter we read, in chapter 2, how she believed the same method that worked for the children in the asylum would also work, and did in fact work, with the children in the poor neighborhoods, right? The poor children, the children from the poor families. And so, and she had just, again, opened up the school in the middle class family. And I'm just wondering a lot, like, if it was adapted the same or at that time, or was there some things that they had to like maneuver or work? I don't know. Like, that would be a very interesting thing to kind of explore. So the reason that this chapter to me feels very relevant today is because, one, we could all use a lot more dignity going around. Two, I just, I think that we gloss over, intentionally or unintentionally, her core beliefs when it comes to moral and social teachings. And I think that is important to her work. It was very central. And so I think that's why this chapter to me makes so much sense to be towards the front, because then it really makes it very clear what is going on in the rest of her manuscript here. So with that, let's go ahead and begin with let's go ahead and continue with Dr. Montessori's words herself. And this would be her address, okay? So chapter 3, the inaugural address delivered on the occasion of the opening of one of the children's houses. It may be that the life lived by the very poor is a thing which some of you here today have never actually looked upon in all its degradation. You may have only felt the misery of deep human poverty through the medium of some great book, or some gifted actor may have made your soul vibrate with its horror. Let us suppose that in some such moment a voice such cry out to you, "Go look upon these homes of misery and blackest poverty." For there have sprung up amid the terror and the suffering cases of happiness, of cleanliness, of peace. The poor are to have an ideal house which shall be their own, in quarters where poverty and vice ruled. A work of moral redemption is going on. The soul of the people is being set free from the torpor of vice, from the shadows of ignorance. The little children, too, have a house of their own. The new generation goes forward to meet the new era, the time when misery shall no longer be deplored, but destroyed. They go to meet the time when the dark dens of vice and wretchedness shall have become things of the past, and when no trace of them shall be found among the living. What a change of emotions we should experience, and how we should hasten here as the wise men, guided by a dream and a star, hastened to Bethlehem. I have spoken thus in order that you may understand the great significance, the real beauty of this humble room, which seems like a bit of the house itself, set apart by a mother's hand for the use and happiness of the children of the quarter. This is the second Children's House, which has been established within an ill-favored quarter of San Lorenzo. The quarter of San Lorenzo is celebrated, for every newspaper in the city is filled with almost daily accounts of its wretched happenings. Yet there are many who are not familiar with the origin of this portion of our city. It was never intended to build up here a tenement district for the people. And indeed, San Lorenzo is not the people's quarter, it is the quarter of the poor. It is the quarter where lives the underpaid, often underemployed, working man, a common type in a city which has no factory industries. It is the home for him who undergoes the period of surveillance to which he is condemned after his prison sentence is ended. They are all here mingled, huddled together. The district of San Lorenzo sprang into being between 1884 and 1888. At the time of the great building fever. No standards, either social or hygienic, guided these new constructions. The aim in building was simply to cover the walls, square foot after square foot of ground. The more space covered, the greater the gain of the interested banks and companies. All this with a complete disregard of the disastrous future which they were preparing. It was natural that no one should concern himself with the stability of the building he was creating, since in no case would the property remain in the possession of him who built it. When the storm burst in the shape of the inevitable building panic of 1888 to 1890, these unfortunate houses remained for a long time untenanted. Then, little by little, the need for dwelling places began to make itself felt, and these great houses began to fill. Now those speculators who had been so unfortunate as to remain possessors of these buildings could not and did not wish to add fresh capital to that already lost. So the houses constructed, in the first place in utter disregard of all laws of hygiene, and rendered still worse by having been used as temporary habitations, came to be occupied by the poorest class in the city. The apartments, not being prepared for the working class, were too large, consisting of 5, 6, or 7 rooms. These were rented at a price which, while exceedingly low in relation to the size, was yet too high for any one family of very poor people. This led to the evil of subletting. The tenant who had taken a 6-room apartment at $8 a month sublets rooms at $1.50 or $2 a month to those who can pay as much, and a corner of a room or a corridor to the poorest tenant, thus making an income of $15 or more over and above the cost of his own rent. This means that the problem of existence is in great part solved for him, and that in every case he adds to his income through usury. The one who holds the lease traffics in the misery of his fellow tenants, lending small sums at a rate which generally corresponds to 20 cents a week for the loan of $2, equivalent to an annual rate of 500%. Thus we have an evil of subletting, the most cruel form of usury, that which only the poor know how to practice upon the poor. To this we must add the evils of crowded living, promiscuousness, immorality, and crime. Immorality and crime. Every little while the newspaper uncover for us that these interiors, a large family growing boys and girls, sleep in one room, while one corner of the room is occupied by an outsider, a woman who receives the nightly visits of men. This is seen by the girls and the boys. Evil passions are kindled that lead to the crime and bloodshed which unveil for a brief instant before our eyes, in some lurid paragraph, this little detail of the mass of misery. Whoever enters for the first time or for these apartments is astonished and horrified, for the spectacle of genuine misery is not at all like the garish scene he has imagined. We enter here a world of shadows, and that which strikes us first is the darkness which, even through it at the midday, makes it impossible to distinguish any of the details of the room. When the eye has grown accustomed to the gloom, we perceive within the outlines of a bed upon which lies huddled a figure, someone ill and suffering. If we have come to bring money from some society for mutual aid, a candle must be lighted before the sum can be counted and the receipt signed. Oh, when we talk of social problems, how often we speak vaguely, drawing upon our fancy for details instead of preparing ourselves to judge intelligently through a personal investigation of facts and conditions. We discuss earnestly the question of home study for school children, when for so many of them home means a straw pallet thrown down in the corner of some dark hovel. We wish to establish circulating libraries that the poor may read at home. We plan to send among these people books which shall form their domestic literature, books through whose influence they shall come to a higher standard of living. We hope through the printed page to educate these poor people in matters of hygiene, of morality, of culture, and with this we show ourselves profoundly ignorant of their most crying needs, for many of them have no light by which to read. There lies before the social crusader of the present day a problem more profound than that of the intellectual elevation of the poor, the problem, indeed, of life. In speaking of the children born in these places, even the conventional expressions must be changed, for they do not first see the light of day. They come into a world of gloom. They grow among the poisonous shadows which envelop overcrowded humanity. These children cannot be other than filthy in body, since the water supply in an apartment originally intended to be occupied by 3 or 4 persons, when distributed among 20 to 30, is scarcely enough for drinking purposes. We Italians have elevated our word casa to the almost sacred significance of the English word home, the enclosed temple of domestic affection, accessible only to dear ones. Far removed from this conception is the condition of the many who have no casa, but only ghastly walls within which the most intimate acts of life are exposed upon the pillory. Here we can be no privacy, no modesty, no gentleness. Here there is often not even light, nor air, nor water. It seems a cruel mockery to introduce here our idea of the home as essential to the education of the masses, and as furnishings, along with the family, the only solid basis for the social structure. In doing this, we would not practical reformers, but visionary poets. Conditions such as I have described make it more decorous, more hygienic for these people to take refuge in the street and to let their children live there. But how often these streets are the scenes of bloodshed, of quarrel, of sights so vile as to be almost inconceivable. The papers tell us of women pursued and killed by drunken husbands, of young girls with the fear of worse than death stoned by low men. Again, we see untellable things, a wretched woman thrown by the drunken men who have preyed upon her forth into the gutter. There, when day has come, the children of the neighborhood crowd about her like scavengers about their dead prey, shouting and laughing at the sight of the wreck of womanhood, kicking her bruised and filthy body as it lies in the mud of the gutter. Such spectacles of extreme brutality are possible here at the very gate of a cosmopolitan city, the mother of civilization and the queen of fine arts, because of the new fact which was unknown to past centuries, namely, the isolation of the masses of the poor. In the Middle Ages, leprosy was isolated. The Catholics isolated the Hebrews in the ghetto, but poverty was never considered a peril, an infamy so great that it must be isolated. The homes of the poor were scattered among those of the rich, and the contrast between these was commonplace in literature up to our own times. Indeed, when I was a child in school, teachers, for the purpose of moral education, frequently resorted to the illustrations of the kind princess who sends help to the poor cottage next door, or of the good children from the great house who carry food to the sick woman in the neighboring attic. Today, all this would be as unreal and artificial as a fairy tale. The poor may no longer learn from their more fortunate neighbors lessons in courtesy and good breeding. They no longer have the hope of help from them in case of extreme need. We have herded them together far from us without the walls, leaving them to learn of each other in the abandon of desperation, the cruel lessons of brutality and vice. Anyone in whom the social conscience is awake must see that we have thus created infected regions that threaten the deadly peril of the city which, wishing to make all beautiful and shining according to an aesthetic and aristocratic ideal, has thrust without its walls whatever is ugly or disease. When I passed for the first time through these streets, it was as if I found myself in a city upon which some great disaster had fallen. It seemed to me that the shadow of some recent struggle still oppressed the unhappy people who, with something very like terror in their pale faces, passed me in these silent streets. The very silence seemed to signify the life of a community interrupted, broken. Not a carriage, not even a cheerful voice of the ever-present street vendor, nor the sound of the hand organ playing in the hope of a few pennies. Not even these things, so characteristic of poor quarters, enter here to lighten this sad and heavy silence. Observing these streets with their deep holes, the deep steps broken and tumbling, we might almost suppose that this disaster had been in the nature of a great inundation which had carried the very earth away. But looking about us at the houses stripped of all decorations and the walls broken and scarred, we are inclined to think that it was perhaps an earthquake which has afflicted this quarter. Then looking still more closely, we see that in all of this thickly settled neighborhood there is not a shop to be found. So poor is the community that it has not been possible to establish even one of those popular bazaars where necessary articles are sold at so low a price as to put them within the reach of anyone. The only shops of any sort are the lone wine shops which open their evil-smelling doors to the passer-by. As we look upon all this, it is borne upon us that the disaster which has placed its weight of suffering upon these people is not a convulsion of nature, but poverty. Poverty with its inseparable companion, vice. This unhappy and dangerous state of things, to which our attention is called at intervals of newspaper accounts of violent and immoral crime, stirs the heart and consciousness of many who come to undertake among these people some work of generous benevolence. One might almost say that every form of misery inspires a special remedy, and that all have been tried here, from the attempt to introduce hygienic principles to each house, to the establishment of creches, children's houses, and dispensaries. But what indeed is benevolence? Little more than an expression of sorrow. It is pity translated into action. The benefits of such a form of charity cannot be great, and though the absence of any continued income and the lack of organization, it is restricted to a small number of persons. The great and widespread peril of evil demands, on the other hand, a broad, comprehensive work direct directed towards the redemption of the entire community. Only such an organization as working for the good of others shall itself grow and prosper through the general prosperity which it has made possible, can be a place for itself in this quarter and accomplish a permanent good work. It is to meet this dire necessity that the great and kindly work of the Roman Association of Good Buildings has been undertaken. The advanced and highly modern way in which this work is being carried on is due to Eduardo Talabo, Director General of the Association. His plans, so original, so comprehensive, yet so practical, are without counterpart in Italy or elsewhere. This association was incorporated 3 years ago in Rome, its plan being to acquire city tenements, remodel them, put them into a productive condition, and administer them as a good father of a family would. The first property acquired comprised a large portion of the quarter of San Lorenzo, where today the association possesses 58 houses occupying a ground space of about 30,000 square meters and containing, independent of the ground floor, 1,600 small apartments. Thousands of people will, in this way, receive the benefit influence of the protective reforms of the Good Building Association. Following its benefit program, the association set about transforming these old houses according to the most modern standards, paying as much attention to questions related to hygiene and morals as to those relating to buildings. The constructional changes would make the property of real and lasting value, while the hygienic and moral transformation would, through the improved condition of the inmates, make the rent from these apartments a more definite asset. The Association of Good Building therefore decided upon the program which would permit of a gradual attainment of their ideal. It is necessary to proceed slowly because it is not easy to empty a tenement house at a time when houses are scarce. And the humanitarian principles which govern the entire movement make it impossible to proceed more rapidly in this work of regeneration. So it is that the association has up to the present time transformed only 3 houses in the quarter of San Lorenzo. The plan followed in this transformation is as follows. A. To demolish in every building all portions of the structure not originally constructed with the idea of making homes, but from a purely commercial standpoint of making the rental roll larger. In other words, the new management tore down those parts of the building which encumbered the central court, thus doing away with the dark and ill-ventilated apartments and giving air and light to the remaining portion of the tenement. Broad, airy courts take the place of the inadequate air and light shafts, rendering the remaining apartments more valuable and infinitely more desirable. B. To increase the number of stairways and to divide the room space into a more practical way. The large 6 or 7 room suites are reduced to small apartments of 1, 2, or 3 rooms and a kitchen. The importance of such changes may be recognized from the economic point of view of the proprietor as well as from the standpoint of the moral and material welfare of the tenant. Increasing the number of stairways diminishes that abuse of walls and stairs inevitably where so many persons may pass up and down. The tenants more readily learn to respect the building and acquire habits of cleanliness and order. Not only this, but in reducing the chances of contact among the inhabitants of the house, especially late at night, a great advance has been made in the matter of moral hygiene. The division of the house into small apartments has done much towards this moral regeneration. Each family is thus set apart, homes are made possible, while the menacing evil of subletting together with all its disastrous consequences of overcrowding and immorality, is checked in the most radical way. On one side, this arrangement lessens the burden of the individual leaseholders, and on the other increases the income of the proprietor, who now receives those earnings which were the unlawful gain of the system of subletting. When the proprietor who originally rented an apartment of 6 rooms for a monthly rental of $8 makes such an apartment over into 3 small, sunny, and airy suites consisting of 1 room and a kitchen, it is evident that he increases his income. The moral importance of this reform, as it stands today, is tremendous, for it has done away with those evil influences and low opportunities which arise from crowding and from promiscuous contact, and has brought to life among these people for the first time the gentle sentiment of feeling themselves free within their own homes in the intimacy of the family. But the project of the association goes beyond even this. The house which it offers to its tenants is not only sunny and airy, but in perfect order and repair, almost shiny, and as if perfumed with purity and freshness. These good things, however, carry with them a responsibility which the tenant must assume if he wishes to enjoy them. He must pay an actual tax of care and goodwill. The tenant who receives a clean house must keep it so, must respect the walls from the big general entrance of the interior of his own little apartment. He who keeps his house in good condition receives the recognition and consideration due such a tenant. Thus all the tenants unite in an ennobling warfare for practical hygiene, an end made possible by the simple task of conserving the already perfect conditions. Here indeed is something new. So far only our great national buildings have had a continued maintenance fund. Here in these houses offered to the people, the maintenance is confided to 100 or so working men, that is, to all the occupants of the building. This care is almost perfect. The people keep the house in perfect condition, without a single spot. The building in which we find ourselves today has been for 2 years under the sole protection of the tenants, and the work of maintenance has been left entirely to them. Yet few of our houses can compare in cleanliness and freshness with this home of the poor. The experiment has been tried and the result is remarkable. The people acquire, together with the love of homemaking, that is cleanliness. They come, moreover, to wish to beautify their home. The association helps this by placing growing plants and trees in the courts and about the halls. Out of this honest rivalry in matters so productive of good grows a species of pride new to this quarter. This is the pride which the entire body of tenants takes in having the best cared for building and in having risen to a higher and more civilized plane of living. They not only live in a house, but they know how to live. They know how to respect the house in which they live. This first impulse has led to other reforms. From the clean home will come personal cleanliness. Dirty furniture cannot be tolerated in a clean house, and those persons living in a permanently clean house will come to desire personal cleanliness. One of the most important hygienic reforms of the association is that of the baths. Each remodeled tenement has a place set apart for bathrooms, furnished with tubs or showers and having hot and cold water. All the tenants in regular turn may use these baths, as for example in various tenements the occupants go according to turn to wash their clothes in the fountain in the court. This is a great convenience which invites the people to be clean. These hot and cold baths within the house are a great improvement upon the general public baths. In this way we make possible to these people at one and at the same time health and refinement, opening not only to the sun, but to the progress. Those darkened habitations, once the vile caves of misery. But in striving to realize its ideal of a semi-gratuitous maintenance of its building, the association met with a difficulty in regard to those children under school age who must often be left alone during the entire day while their parents went out to work. These little ones, not being able to understand the educative motives which taught their parents to respect the house, became ignorant little vandals, defacing the walls and stairs. And here we have another reform, the expense of which may be considered as indirectly assumed by the tenants as was the care of the building. This reform may be considered as the most brilliant transformation of a tax which progress and civilization has yet devised. The Children's House is earned by the parents through the care of the building. Its expenses are met by the sum that the association would have otherwise been forced to spend upon repairs. A wonderful climax, this, of moral benefits received. Within the Children's House, which belongs exclusively to those children under school age, working mothers may safely leave their little ones and may proceed with a feeling of great relief and freedom to their own work. But this benefit, like that of the care of the house, is not conferred without a tax of care and of goodwill. The regulations posted on the wall announce it thus. The mothers are all obliged to send their children to the children's house clean and to cooperate with the directress in the educational work. Two obligations, namely the physical and moral care of their own children. If the child shows through its conversation that the educational work of the school is being undermined by the attitude taken in his home, he will be sent back to his parents to teach them thus how to take advantage of their good opportunities. Those who give themselves over to low living, to fighting, and to brutality shall feel upon them the weight of those little lives so needing care. They shall feel that they themselves have once more cast into the darkness of neglect those little creatures who are the dearest part of the family. In other words, the parents must learn to deserve the benefit of having within the house the great advantage of a school for their little ones. Goodwill, a willingness to meet the demands of the association is enough, for the directress is ready and willing to teach them how. The regulations say that the mother must go at least once a week to confer with the directress, giving an account of her child and accepting any helpful advice which the directress may be able to give. The advice thus given will undoubtedly prove most illuminating in regard to the child's health and education, since to each of the children's house is assigned a physician as well as a directress. The directress is always at the disposition of the mother's and her life as a cultured and educated person, is a constant example to the inhabitants of the house, for she is obliged to live in the tenement and to be therefore a cohabitant with the families of all her little pupils. A cohabitant with the families of all. This is a fact of immense importance. Among these almost savage people, into these houses where at night no one dared to go about unarmed, there has come not only to teach, but to live the very life they live, a gentlewoman of culture, an educator by profession, who dictates her time and her life to helping those about her, a true missionary, a moral queen among the people. She may, if she be possessed of sufficient tact and heart, reap an unheard of harvest of good from her social work. This house is verily new. It would seem a dream impossible of realization, but it has been tried. It is true that there have been before this attempts made by generous persons to go and live among the poor to civilize them. But such work is not practical unless the house of the poor is hygienic, making it possible for people of better standards to live there. Nor can such work succeed in its purpose unless some common advantage or interest unites all of the tenants in an effort towards better living, or better things, This tenement is new also because of the pedagogical organization of the children's house. This is not simply a place where the children are kept, not just an asylum, but a true school for their education, and its methods are inspired by the rational principles of scientific pedagogy. The physical development of the children is followed, each child being studied from the anthropological standing point. Linguistic exercises, a systematic sense training, and exercises which directly fit the child for the duties of practical life form the basis of the work done. The teaching is decidedly objective and presents an unusual richness of didactic material. It is not possible to speak of all this in detail. I must, however, mention that there already exists a connection with the school, a bathroom, where the children may be given hot or cold baths, where they may learn to take a partial bath, hands, feet, neck, ears. Wherever possible, the association has provided a piece of ground in which the children may learn to cultivate the vegetables in common use. It is important that I speak here of the pedagogical progress attained by the Children's House as an institution. Those who are conversant with the chief problems of the school Know that today much attention is given to a great principle, one that is ideal and almost beyond realization, the union of the family and the school in the matter of educational aims. But the family is always something far away from the school, and is almost always regarded as rebelling against its ideals. It is a species of phantom upon which the school can never lay its hands. The home is closed not only to pedagogical progress, but often to social progress. We see here for the first time the possibility of realizing the long talked of pedagogical ideal. We have put the school within the house. And this is not all. We have placed it within the house as the property of the collectivity, leaving under the eyes of the parents the whole life of the teacher in the accomplishment of her high mission. This idea of the collective ownership of the school is new and very beautiful and profoundly educational. The parents know that the children's house is their property and is maintained by a portion of the rent they pay. The mothers may go at any hour of the day to watch, to admire, or to meditate upon the life there. It is in every way a continual stimulus to reflection, and a font of evident blessing and help to their own children. We may say that the mothers adore the children's house and the directress. How many delicate and thoughtful attentions these good mothers show the teacher of their little ones. They often leave sweets or flowers upon the sill of the schoolroom window as a silent token, reverently, almost religiously given. And when after 3 years of such a notive, the mothers send their children to the common schools, they will be excellently prepared to cooperate in the work of education, and will have acquired a sentiment rarely found even among the best classes, namely the idea that they must merit through their own conduct and with their own virtue the possession of an educated son. Another advance made by the Children's House as an institution is related to the scientific pedagogy. This branch of pedagogy theretofore, being based upon the anthropological study of the pupil whom it is to educate, has touched only a few of the positive questions which tend to transform education. For a man is not only a biological but a social product, and the social environment of individuals in the process of education is the home. Scientific pedagogy will seek in vain to better the new generation if it does not succeed in influencing all the environment within this new generation grows. I believe, therefore, that in opening the house to the light of new truths, and to the progress of civilization, we have solved the problem of being able to modify directly the environment of the new generation, and have thus made it possible to apply in a practical way the fundamental principles of scientific pedagogy. The Children's House marks still another triumph. It is the first step toward the socialization of the house. The inmates find under their own roof the convenience of being able to leave their little ones in a place not only safe, but where they have every advantage. And let it be remembered that all the mothers in the tenement may enjoy this privilege, going away to their work with easy minds. Until the present time, only one class of society might have this advantage. Rich women were able to go about their various occupations and amusements, leaving their children in the hands of a nurse or a governess. Today, the women of the people who live in these remodeled houses may say, like the great lady, I have left my son with the governess and the nurse. More than this, they may add, like the princess of the blood, and the house physician watches over them and directs their sane and sturdy growth. These women, like the most advanced class of English and American mothers, possess a biographical chart, which, filled for the mother by the directress and the doctor, gives her the most practical knowledge of her children's growth and condition. We are all familiar with the ordinary advances of the communistic transformation of the general environment. For example, the collective use of railway carriages, of streetlights, of the telephone. All these are great advantages. The enormous production of useful articles brought about by industrial progress makes possible to all clean clothes, carpets, curtains, table delicacies, better tableware, etc. The making of such benefits generally tends to level social caste. All this we may have seen in its reality, but the communizing of persons is new. That the collectivity shall benefit from the services of the servant, the nurse, the teacher, this is a modern ideal. We have in the Children's House a demonstration of this ideal which is unique in Italy or elsewhere. Its significance is most profound, for it corresponds to the need of the times. We can no longer say that the convenience of leaving their children takes away from the mother a natural social duty of first importance, namely that of caring for and educating her tender offspring. No, for today the social and economic evolution calls the working woman to take her place among wage earners, and takes away from her by force those duties which would be most dear to her. The mother must in any event leave her child, and often with the pain of knowing him to be abandoned. The advantages furnished by such institutions are not limited to the laboring class, but extends also to the general middle class, many of whom work with the brain. Teachers, professors, often obliged to give private lessons after school hours, frequently leave their children to the care of some rough and ignorant maid of all work. Indeed, the first announcement of the Children's House was followed by a deluge of letters from persons of the better class demanding that these helpful reforms be extended to their dwellings. We are then communizing a maternal function, a feminine duty within the house. We may see here in this practical act the solving of many of women's problems, which have seemed too many impossible of solution. What then will become of the home? One asks. If the woman goes away from it, the home will be transformed and will assume the functions of the woman. I believe that in the future of society, other forms of communistic life will come. Take, for example, the infirmary. Woman is the natural nurse for the dear ones of her household. Not knowing how often in these days she is obliged to tear herself unwillingly from the bedside of her sick to go to work. Competition is great, and her absence from her post threatens the tenure of the position from which she draws the means of support. To be able to leave the sick one in a house infirmary to which she may have access any free moments she may have, and where she is at liberty to watch during the night, would be an evident advantage to such a woman. And how great would be the progress made in the matter of family hygiene, in all that relates to isolation and disinfection. Who does not know the difficulties of a poor family when one child is ill of some contagious disease, and should be isolated from the others? Often such a family may have no kindred or friends in the city to whom the other children may be sent. Much more distant, but not impossible, is the communal kitchen, where the dinner ordered in the morning is sent at the proper time by means of a dumbwaiter to the family dining room. Indeed, this has been successfully tried in America. Such a reform would be of the greatest advantage to those families of the middle class who must confide their health and their pleasures of the table to the hands of an ignorant servant who ruins the food. At present, the only alternative in such cases is to go outside the home to some cafe where a cheap table d'hôte may be had. Indeed, the transformation of the house must compensate for the loss of the family, of the presence of the woman who has become a social wage earner. In this way, the house will become a center, drawing into itself all those good things which have hitherto been lacking: schools, public baths, hospitals, etc. Thus, the tendency will be to change the tenement houses which have been placed of vice and peril into centers of education, of refinement, of comfort. This will be helped if, besides the school for the children, there may grow up also clubs and reading rooms for the inhabitants, especially for the men, who will find there a way to pass the evening pleasantly and decently. The tenement club, as possible and as useful in all social classes, is as the children's house. Will do much towards closing the gambling houses and saloons to the great moral advantage of the people. And I believe that the Association of the Good Building will before long establish such clubs in its reformed tenements here in the quarter of San Lorenzo. Clubs where the tenants may find newspapers and books, and where they may hear simple and helpful lectures. We are then very far from the dreaded dissolution of the home and of the family through the fact that women have been forced by changing social and economic conditions to give her time and strength through remunerative work. The home itself assumes the gentle feminine attributes of the domestic housewife. The day may come when the tenant, having given the proprietor of the house a certain sum, shall receive in exchange whatever is necessary to the comfort of life. In other words, the administration shall become the steward of the family. The house thus considered tends to assume in its evolution a significance more exalted than even the English word home expresses. It does not consist of walls alone, though these walls be the pure and shining guardians of that intimacy which is the sacred symbol of the family. The home shall become more than this. It lives. It has a soul. It may be said to embrace its inmates with the tender and consoling arms of woman. It is the giver of moral life, of blessing. It cares for, it educates and feeds the little ones. Within it, the tired workman shall find rest and newness of life. He shall find there the intimate life of the family and its happiness. The new woman, like the butterfly, come forth from the chrysalis, shall be liberated from all those attributes which once made her desirable to man only as the source of the material blessings of existence. She shall be, like man, an individual, a free human being, a social worker, and like man, she shall seek blessing and repose within the house which has been reformed and communized. She shall wish to be loved for herself and not as a giver of comfort and repose. She shall wish a love free from every form of servile labor. The goal of human love is not the egotistical end of assuring its own satisfaction. It is the sublime goal of multiplying the forces of the free spirit, making it almost divine, and within such beauty and light perpetuating the species. This ideal love is made incarnate by Friedrich Nietzsche in the woman of Zarathustra, who consciously wished her son to be better than she. "Why do you desire me?" she asked the man. "Perhaps because of the perils of a solitary life. In that case, go far from me. I wish the man who has conquered himself, who has made his soul great. I wish the man who has conserved a clean and robust body. I wish the man who desires to unite with me, body and soul, to create a son better, more perfect, stronger than any created there heretofore. To better the species consciously, cultivating his own health, his own virtue, this should be the goal of man's married life. It is a sublime concept of which, as yet, few think. And the socialized home of the future, living, providently, kindly, educator and comforter, is the true and worthy home of those human mates who wish to better the species and to send the race forward triumph into the eternity of life. Rules and regulations of the children's houses. The Roman Association of Good Building hereby establishes within its tenement house number a children's house in which may be gathered together all children under common school age belonging to the families of the tenants. The chief aim of the Children's House is to offer free of charge to the children of those parents who are obliged to absent themselves for their work the personal care which the parents are not able to give. In the Children's House, attention is given to the education, the health, the physical and moral development of the children. This work is carried on in a way suited to the age of the children. There shall be connected with the Children's House a directress, a physician, and a caretaker. The program and hours of the Children's House shall be fixed by the directress. There may be admitted to the Children's House all the children in the tenement between the ages of 3 and 7. The parents who wish to avail themselves to the advantages of the Children's House pay nothing. They must, however, assume these binding obligations: to send their children to the Children's House at the appointed time, clean in body and clothing, and provided with a suitable apron. To show the greatest respect and deference towards the directress and towards all persons connected with the Children's House, and to cooperate with the directress herself in the education of the children. Once a week, at least, the mothers may talk with the directress, giving her information concerning the home life of the child and receiving helpful advice from her. There shall be expelled from the Children's House those children who present themselves unwashed or in soiled clothing, those who show themselves to be incorrigible, and those whose parents fail to respect to the persons connected with the Children's House, or who destroy through bad conduct the educational work of the institution. That concludes this chapter of the Montessori Method. Thank you for listening and for taking part in this journey with me. This project is very much an exploration. If you have thoughts to add, questions to ask, or if you think I misunderstood or missed something important, I generally want to hear from you. Please message me, share your reflections, or continue the conversation with fellow listeners. On a quest to learning, relearning, and engaging deeply with Dr. Montessori's work as we go. Join me next time as we continue chapter by chapter.